Hey everybody, this is Eric with the Drumatic and another Friday bonus video. I've got my friend Dave Van Fleet here. Dave, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be here with you.
I'm so glad. This is exciting, guys. Dave showed me my first drum groove, and I was telling him just a minute ago that it literally opened it up. I was just learning like snare drum stuff, and I remember you coming over to our house in New Hampshire. Had that little 3-piece like
CB700.
yeah, and just showed me that that quarter note, boom, chick,
And 2 and 4.
and it just having and of course the snare drum stuff is important to learn all that rhythm stuff, but it just totally opened up my mind to how cool drumming was going to be, and so if I don't know if I would have gotten there as quickly if you hadn't showed me that beat, but it was very influential. And you said something to me too. You said listen to as many kinds of music as you can get your hands on, whether they're your favorite or not, and just learn how to play those things and learn what how to appreciate these other styles of music, because everything kind of is influenced by
a lot of different genres.
the next thing.
Right.
So that's how Dave and I know each other originally, and then of course you kind of were involved with the youth group and stuff in New Hampshire and all that. But tell me a little bit about your musical influences. Like, why did you go drums? That's what I want to do.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a pretty musical family. My dad was a trumpeter. My mom was a guitarist and pianist and organ. My sister also piano. And so, in fact, my mom, ironically, she met the Lord in 1935 with my grandparents, Nunn and Papa, all at one meeting. And my Papa had already started playing some guitar, and Mom started playing guitar. And between the ages of 7 and 11, every Sunday night, she was playing Hawaiian guitar on the radio in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, in that area. And so she just loved music, had a great voice. And my Nana always playing the organ when we'd go visit. And so when I was probably 3, I started tapping on everything. I started using silverware, and then I graduated to pencils. And then I was tapping on tin cans outside. I'd set up different can sizes for different tones. Then I graduated to suitcases. And at this point, my parents were getting really scared when I said, I don't want to take piano, I don't want to do trumpet, I want to be a drummer. And this is, of course, early 60s, and they're all freaking out because all they think it was long hair and acid, but they were just a few years premature, which finally it came, unfortunately. But so they didn't like that. And the thing that really got me, among a few other things, was a friend a couple doors down, his brother got a beautiful set of Slingerlands, blue satin. And he only played them for about a year or two, and they decided to sell them. He didn't want anything to do with it, and they were $50, which initially they were probably about $450 or $500 for that set. And my parents refused to get it, and I was freaked out. I ran away, as I did on a lot of different occasions. But at that point, I just knew I wanted to be a drummer, and they didn't want that. So at 9, they finally allowed me to get a snare drum, which within about an hour I was bored with, and so that was kind of a drag. But we were watching Ed Sullivan. Every Saturday we would watch Mr. Bubbles, right? The guy with what was his name, Lawrencewell, and then we'd watch Lassie, and then a little bit later that night we would watch I think it was Sunday nights, Ed Sullivan. And so that was every weekend. So I watched a lot of players, a lot of people, really enjoyed it. I loved the Beatles, of course, early on, but then I graduated to some other type of stuff. So a lot of early influences. I loved Cream when I first heard Ginger Baker, and then Steppenwolf came out with Born to be Wild and Magic Carpet Ride, and I loved Jerry Edmonton. I just loved the look, the sound. And then, of course, Zepp came along in '69, got pretty popular, and then really started getting into the Southern music. Allman Brothers, Charlie Daniels, Outlaws in those early '70s, and then a major shift took place when I started hearing somebody that turned me on to a guy named Billy Cobham, who was just an amazing drummer, still is to this day, and started buying his albums. And then George Benson's Breezin' came out on Christmas Eve, I think it was '75 or '76, and that just changed everything, and it opened up the whole world. I had already watched Return to Forever on Don Kirshner's rock concert, and Lenny White, who was a right-handed drummer, playing lefty with Al Di Meola, Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea, and again, that was '74, '75, so that just opened up the whole world of jazz and fusion. And so most of the rock and roll kind of not as much. I always loved the blues, but those were some of the earliest influences for me. And I loved everybody else. I mean, I played along to Hendrix and all the other stuff in my room with a stolen set of, I stole a set of skis, traded for my first drum set and played those, and I got my beautiful Rogers kit on for Christmas of '75. So there's a little wee bit as we go.
Yeah, and we were talking about your Rogers kit
Yeah.
just last night. Tell me a little bit about that. There was the
Well, again, I went to I think it was in 1972 or 3, went to a school dance. The band that was there, they were older brothers of guys that I was in school with, and they were just ripping. They were playing Reelin' in the Years by Steely Dan, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, the White Edgar Winter's, Ricky Derringer's version from White Trash Roadwork, the live album that they did. And I saw this set of drums. They were Black Diamond Pearl. And they just had an amazing sound. They looked great under the lights. And I remember saying, Lord, I would love that set. If you can get me that set someday. Yeah, I was playing this really junky set. And a couple of years later, I go in and there's a music store in the town, and there they were. And I said, was this Gary's set? And he goes, yeah, he's not playing anymore. He traded it in and he bought something else. So I said, how much? He said, $750. I said, oh, man, I only got like 200 or 300. And so I said, I got this junky set. And I got some cymbals. And in the end, we decided he'd give me $350. And so my mom gave me the last couple hundred, and I walked home that night with a beautiful Rogers set, which I thought were all 68, but it wasn't. In the end, I wound up realizing that the snare, which was a wood Dynasonic, was 1965, and the rest of the set was a 67. And so I had that set and still have it to this day. And it's the nucleus of a 10-piece that I now play with other Rogers pieces and others from early 70s, and just an incredible set, and I love them to my pride and joy. Even though I've owned other sets, and I still have other sets, but still about 4 or 5.
That's the
sets.
set.
That's the set I use in the basement for worship. And I took it on the street a number of times, and I said I can't do it. They're too good, and they're worth too much. Which at the time when I first got them, I knew they were worth something, but I had no idea how much and what.
Yeah.
And so they're a collector's item. There's only a few like them out there. They only made 3,000 of those particular Dynasonics in different colors and schemes of wood. And I just happened to have one. And of course, I told you the story. I met the man who in 1965 worked for Rogers in Covington, Ohio. He assembled it and tuned it. And so here I'm sitting with him, and he's 80 years old. I'm sitting in his house and having a time of my life, being with a man of history who had been there. He started in 1960, and I was just having an amazing time. And sat there, and he retuned it, put his little paper tag on the inside, Jerry Shields, and we just got to be close friends. He passed away a year ago, a little less than a year ago, but it was just one of the joys of my life to be there with this guy who knew all the history and worked for the Rogers Company in the 60s, and lived in Covington, born and raised there, and was a Rogers man till the end.
That's really cool. Like I can't imagine just the snare that you had as a young guy, the guy that built it, then kind of struck it up a friendship, and then having him tune it again, and
I got a video of him actually tuning it, working with it, and then playing it. I took some video, and he just loved it too. And he's the one who told me it was a 65. I thought it was a 67, but he knew all the serial numbers. And so when he went back and looked at it, he goes, no, this is 65, and your other drums are 67. So yeah, pretty cool stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he also built a set that we had there, and he played that, and man, it was just amazing. So,
that's cool. That's cool. Growing up in a different era that I grew up in, like obviously musical influences were different, but you were responsible for some of the musical influences too. The Petras,
right.
and I think you and our pastor at the church we were going to, Steve Powell's, Michael W. Smith,
right.
And still, those are bands that I still will listen to today and enjoy listening to. In fact, not too long ago, we covered Be Strong and Courageous by Michael W. Smith. And I still love to go back to that stuff. Nostalgic and just be a real, we were talking about this last night. There's some music that stands the test of time.
Sure.
There's some that doesn't do that as well. But it's still fun to go back and listen to something that you liked as a kid and be like, it just kind of brings you back to a certain place. And
well, it reminds me, just talking, I just realized the first thing that I told you to actually practice with was a live album by Larry Howard, because I told you, learn to play the blues, learn to get the basic blues down. And so that was an album that I had at that time. And it's funny because I got to meet a guy who plays guitar. His name is Skip. He lives in Florida now. And he was actually Larry Howard's guitar player for a number of years.
Oh, wow.
And now he and I have been friends for a number of years. He lives in Lakeland. And he actually called me up one night. He was at a Fuzzy's Taco place, and he and his wife sing and do stuff. And brought me up, and we did We Can Only Imagine together. So that was just kind of cool to play with him and sing Just Come Up Out of the Blue and play, which is one of my all-time favorite songs, because you can really vamp on that and freestyle it lyrically. So that was kind of cool. But I remember that was the first thing I actually told you to learn. Learn the blues, play the slow blues, and build yourself up. So Larry Howard, who just passed away a couple years ago. There's a great guitar player, singer, blues guy. So
that cassette made its way through a dozen moves. It's probably still in a, like I probably still have it. Like
I have an album of it still.
That's awesome. And that's something that's gone around and come around too. Like, oh, vinyl, that's so yesterday. Cassettes, and we're like, wait, cassettes aren't that great. And then it was CDs, and then now digital formats. But now people are wanting, myself included, like something. I'll always liked having a CD or a cassette, like.
Right.
But now it's like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Like I have the vinyl of it. There's it's like a giant CD case.
It's like I can't get to a Kindle. People love Kindle. I can't do it. I want a book. I want to turn it by hand. I don't want to just press the arrow. Beep. I like having the book. I love to read. I got thousands of books and sing with music. I love having albums. I still have not as many as I used to have, but a bunch. And I still have 8 tracks.
Oh yeah.
Still have 8 tracks.
I
have Montavani on 8 tracks. So that was part of. I had Herb Alford, the Tijuana Brass, growing up around the house, and Al Hurt, the great trumpeter, with my dad, who had that stuff playing around the house all the time. So I go back to a lot of the musical influence came out of them. His parents didn't, but my mom's parents played, of course. And so it was just big. Music's always been big. It's always been a big part of my life.
Yeah. Same here. Obviously, we're talking about different influences, but there's been many times, like in my life, through various kinds of music, that it's really ministered to where I was at in a moment.
Right.
Really spoke deep to a place inside of me, and even times like where I feel like God's been like, "That's your song,"
right.
For this moment.
Yeah.
And those songs are still special to me. They might, even if they like don't stand the test of time,
Right.
what they did for me stand,
Right.
the test of time.
Sure.